Okay, so you can cut, right?
Yeah.
You want me to record the audio?
Yeah, let's try. Just somewhere here.
I could hold it in my hand.
Okay. Wow. So first round will be just a brief introduction by yourself.
Okay.
Just include your background, a little bit, where you're from, your ethnicity, a little bit, and where you grew up and stuff like that, and your family. Okay. And then we'll talk about your experience in the youth ministry or in whatever form, one-on-one or in the church. A little bit of that, and I will connect that to, yeah.
Is it recording now?
Yeah.
Okay.
So let's-
This will be like the outtakes. Okay.
So
Okay. Brief introduction.
it's a very casual talk. Just we'll try to keep it as simple as possible. All right.
Cool. Okay.
All right, guys. Thank you for joining. So we're just gonna go a quick round of introduction. So just tell a little bit about yourself, your family background, and just your past a little bit. Okay. We'll go first.
Sure, I'll go first. My name is Johan Kim. I was born and raised in Paraguay. My parents are missionaries, so that's why they went to Paraguay. And and in 2010 I moved to Korea for college. Yeah, and somehow I ended up here in seminary.
In this podcast.
Did you say you're born in?
Born and raised in Paraguay.
Oh, so you are a Paraguayan. You call Paraguay?
I have both. I have dual
I see.
nationality.
Okay. Cool. All right. We'll come back later on.
Excellent. I'm Daniel. I'm born in the U.S. Just born in New York City, right where Spider-Man, was. He was born. I was like, similar hospital. It's in the comic lore, and so I was just mainly just born and raised in the U.S. and I didn't come to Korea until 2020, right as Corona first broke out.
Yeah.
And I think similar to Johan, I'm also a dual citizen. I didn't know that until coming to Korea and had to wrestle with like, I guess I am Korean, even though I don't feel Korean. And so some stuff. Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Thank you for inviting. My name is David Mujica, David. I was also born and raised in Chile, in South America.
Latino.
So I lived most of my life, all of my life there, until I moved last year to South Korea.
Okay. Sure. Okay, so coming back to the two of you, so how did you learn Korean? Was it mainly from your parents or?
You want to go first?
Oh wait, do you speak Korean by the way? I know he speaks. How about you?
I think that's a very subjective answer,
That's-
In my brain, I think I speak Korean fairly well, but I think in reality, I'm still learning. I went to the pharmacy last week, and so the lady was saying, your Korean sounds more American than most American Korean. I was like, I don't know how to take that. She's like,
It's a good compliment.
It's a good compliment, yeah. She's like, you didn't lose your roots, I think she was saying,
Wow,
And
okay.
I think, to be honest, like growing up, I couldn't speak Korean, so talking with my parents, we couldn't have like any real conversations.
I see.
And there was just so much things that they wanted to impart, and I look back at it now, and it's like I can better understand what they were saying, what they wanted to share, but I couldn't have a real conversation with my parents until I came to Korea and learned Korean.
I could totally relate to
Oh,
that.
yeah?
Yeah.
But you speak, good Korean now, right?
Now, yeah, because I've been here for 13 years.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I forgot about that part.
Yeah, but when I was in middle school, high school, going through puberty, man, it was like communication with my parents, zero.
Yeah.
Close to none.
And I think it's a struggle because there's like a sense of jealousy where other children can talk with their parents, and it's like growing up, it's like, wow, like I can't talk to my parents, And a lot of the conversations in Korean especially is commands. They're imperatives,
Mm-hmm.
밥 먹어, like eat your food, clean your room, get the A+, And it's just,
Be a doctor.
be a doctor or be a lawyer or don't be my child. It's just imperatives, right? And subjunctives.
Right.
It's challenging.
Wow. Okay. Good. Well, David and I, we are trying to learn Korean. I don't know about you. I've just finished my first 1A book, Korean book. Yeah. So I'm going to move to.
No,
1B.
in my case, I've tried, but I think it's not working for now.
All right. Thanks for that little talk on Korean language. I just wanted to talk a little bit about youth. I know most of us, all of us are aware somehow, or even now, are involved with the youth in some ways, maybe in a smaller scale or in a bigger church setting. I just want you to share a little bit about how it has been, whether you were involved in any of the youth ministries, and if you were, then what were the challenges and what are the joys of being in the youth ministry? Just whoever can start.
I think I can.
Okay, David, go ahead.
Well, most of my time working with youth ministry was in Chile.
Sure.
I haven't worked with youth here in Korea. Definitely there's a lot of similarities, but there's a lot of huge differences because culturally we're very different.
Yeah.
So I began actually, even when I was a teenager, I was already a leader of the other teenagers. So I never felt myself like I was the most experienced or the one like with more age than the others. But God still put me in those positions because my parents were part of the leadership in the church. And that's also a different story because I grew up in two very different church backgrounds. For 20 years, I attended a Pentecostal church. And then my last 8 years, I was attending a Baptist church.
Oh, Baptist, yes.
So the way youth ministry operates is very different.
Sure.
Even youth culture is very different in both. Maybe that's for a different conversation. The different denominations is very different. I would say most of the struggles that like my peers and I had when we grew up was how to face the world as people who were raised in a Christian family. Because for me, for example, as a youth, like I never experienced things that most of my friends in high school experienced because I was raised in a Christian home. Like I was never exposed to drugs or alcohol or sex or violence. Even the neighborhood I grew up was not a bad neighborhood in Santiago, in the capital city. So like, I never had those struggles that most teenagers have, or those social pressures. So definitely our conversations inside the church were more about how to deal with that kind of like separation between world and Christian life. How do I face secular life as a Christian? Should I engage with my friends in what they do or they don't do? How to be different? And in that regard, I would say you can whether face it in a good way and don't lose your faith, or you can actually lose your faith in the middle of those questions. The majority of my friends back then, most of them lost their faith, or most of them, even until now, they're struggling a lot in like they're Christians or not. And so I experienced the same thing. But I would say, in related to the culture in general, definitely one of the biggest challenges in Chile with the culture nowadays, and even as I was growing up, was I think drugs and alcoholism is a huge thing. I mean, Latin America in general is well known for a lot of drugs and cartels and that kind of life. So definitely, if you are from a very low part of the society, most teenagers and youth, they don't have a good model to follow. Whether because your parents, you don't see your parents because they work so much because they need to bring income to the house, and you spend most of your time alone, and all because the neighborhood where you are is controlled by a narco, which is the person who deals drug dealer. So you are really exposed to being initiated in that world, and I noticed like the damage that has for people growing up. That you lose your identity and you try to prove yourself. Like most people begin with drugs or alcoholism, and then they commit crimes and stuff like that. So, like I said, that was not my own experience, but definitely was my experience when I went out and deal with my own friends in high school, and how to share my faith with them, how to share hope in the midst of them because I'm privileged. You know, I have a good home.
Yeah.
I'm privileged. I have good parents. Grew up in the faith, but they don't have that. So, in a way, there is this disconnection that I was trying to say. That as a Christians, I faced a lot in those teenage years. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. So just speaking about this connection, we'll talk a little bit about later on about church and whether you think the church is doing well enough to bridge the gap, the disconnect we have with the youth. But yeah, for now we'll just talk also a little bit about your experience in the.
If I can piggyback off of that, because I think it'd be great for later in our podcast that we do talk about it. I think, because a similar background, was saved in a Pentecostal church, and then I went to a very conservative cessationist Bible college called Moody, you know? And there's a level for me where I don't want to deny that spiritual gifts exist and just experiencing the Holy Spirit, but at the same time, like, at least my experience, like, never got to really hear the gospel until I went to Moody, you know? So it was very challenging, but I know in reality, I still wrestle because I think both are so needed.
Yeah.
And it's really the centrality of Christ as center. And I do want to piggyback because I do think it's so important, you know? I guess if we're not talking about just church, but just youth, and we're talking about pedigree, because I mainly did worked with youth as a pastor in Washington and in Las Vegas. And I think in Las Vegas it's really challenging because it almost feels like the church has to play this role of we're more attractive than sin. Come to church, you know, and you can't compete, you know. Las Vegas, it's, you know, like you go to all these music festivals and they're peddling, you know, ecstasy and all these things. It's like we can't compete, right? And I think there's a level where we try to market off to the youth like, oh, church is really great, instead of really like how great Christ is, right? I don't know if I'm just supposed to answer pedigree, but yeah, in Washington and Las Vegas, I think city-wise is different, families is very different, and how the youth are engaged and what it looks like.
Sure.
And so I think, so doing children's ministry in Las Vegas was really different from doing college ministry in Las Vegas.
I see.
Because for children's ministry, it's really like, oh, how do we really bring families together at the Lord's table, right? How do family structures really live the gospel together? How do families and parents exemplify this walk with Christ? That they know what it's like to be in the Word and to commune with the Lord, and the children see that it becomes a rhythm for them. Oh, my daddy talks to the Lord, and you see that in the way that the children talk about their parents. You know, oh yeah, my dad talks with the Lord as well, and he spends time in the Word, and he loves being with Jesus, right? Versus like, yeah, like, you know, we come to Sundays, my dad doesn't want me to be a psychopath, so I come to church, you know. There's like that thing in Vegas. And I think for college students, especially for the Korean American church, I think a lot of Korean American churches in the US for college ministry, it's really how do we bring back those who left the church? And there's this gripping of Calvinism, right? Like, oh, but they grew up in church, they're saved, and once saved, always saved. And there's this ticket that they're holding on to, right? The ticket stub, like they accepted Jesus once, they're gonna come back. And it feels like a college pastor's role in the US for Korean American churches is you have to bring them back. But there's people that God is bringing in that might not be Koreans, right? It's very challenging. How do you engage the youth?
Sure.
Yeah.
I don't have much experience compared to them. Top of my head, what I can think of was when I was working at an English academy, right? I had to pretend that I didn't understand or speak Korean, and I would have to speak only in English to the kids. So they would have conversations in Korean, and they would think that I wouldn't understand. But like the conversation they were talking about, and these were first graders, dude, it's like borderline, I would say demonic, because like you wouldn't imagine a first grader watching porn and talking about it and which porn is better, right? So for me, that was a big shocker.
In Korea?
In Korea. And obviously these kids.
When you say first grader, how old are you talking about?
7, 8?
Yeah.
7, 8? And I think it's like the factors behind it, like technology, phone, right? And even like secular culture. And these kids, obviously they're not Christians, right? They were not Christians. And you could just see like culturally there's this tension between someone's kingdom and God's kingdom, right? So, bottom line, yes, in terms of youth and how we relate it to church, it's
Yeah.
I would say it's a first and foremost a spiritual battle,
Sure.
but then there's an underlying like ideological battle as well.
Sure.
That's a really good perspective. Even I've been telling Johan, I've been going to the PC cafes
Mhm.
after studying just to like relax, and I've been, you know, in this game you can like you have a microphone and so you can communicate with your team.
Right.
And these like elementary students are like straight up threatening each other. And last week one of their insults is like, no, 엄마가 없다. You know, like you don't have a mom.
Your mom's
Like,
dead.
whoa, your mom's
Yeah.
dead. It's like, shoot, like this is your guys' like smack talk. It's pretty bad, you know. And
Yeah.
so for me, I'm like talking to them like, hey, don't say that. You're gonna make your mom cry. Like, don't say that. You know, we're losing, but we're gonna come back. Like, what you threaten? You know what I mean? And it's weird. Some of them are like, yeah, and it's interesting, like how far society is degraded in that sense, right?
yeah.
It's like, oh,
And like the way they talk, it's not big. It's like this is not
yeah.
what a kid was in.
Yeah.
You could tell like
Sure.
and they're like how, why, like
Yeah, where'd you learn this by chance? You know, you're
YouTube is like a
yeah,
So well
right.
informed, right? This is-
it's crazy.
Everything at our fingertips.
Okay. So all right. So just a little digression from the topic, but why do you think is Las Vegas called the Sin City?
Oh, I mean,
I mean, any place in the world these days can be a Sin City, but why?
Sure,
why do you
sure.
think?
That's a great question. There's like we had to learn Las Vegas history growing up in Las Vegas, you know, and you know we could attribute it to many different things, right? We could maybe say it's like there was a time with the gangs, but Las Vegas was always meant to be like a resort for people, like a resort for people to come away and really let off all their problems, right? So it's Las Vegas, Nevada is a desert,
I see.
and in this desert, let's make a paradise so that people can come and do whatever they want and they can go home.
No restraint. Right?
So a majority of the economy of Las Vegas is from tourism,
Oh, I see.
and what it is
Sure.
from
That makes sense.
it's from casinos and gambling.
Yeah.
You know, that's why all the poker tournaments are there. It's why prostitution is legal just a little bit outside of the city of Las Vegas.
Sure.
And strip clubs everywhere. If you ever go to Las Vegas, even in the main downtown area, there's people passing out cards. And I remember when I first went to Las Vegas, I was in 3rd grade. And my family was like, hey, let me show you, this is your new home, right? And people are passing around these cards. And I looked at it, and it was a strip club card. And everything showed except, you know, just like some areas where it's just like blurred out. I'm like, oh! You know, I was like, oh, shoot! You know, like, oh! You know, like, what?
Yeah.
You know, and I looked around, and it was just so normal to everybody. And it wasn't until I kind of left Las Vegas where I'm like, oh, like strip club and gentleman club billboards are, yeah, it's not normal. You know, like driving through Washington, I'm like, oh, you guys don't have strip club billboards here? You know, and it's like, wow.
I see. I know. Thank you. That's just a little digression. I've been having that in my mind. So
Yeah,
to-
it's weird, man.
Okay. We're gonna talk about depression now.
Depression.
It's a topic I've been wanting to talk because before I came to Korea, one of the topics that I researched was safety. And actually, almost everybody who gave a review on Korea, Seoul, they always mention that it's so safe. You can just leave even your stuff, nothing will happen. So, but a few months ago, I think, just over a span of barely a month, we had 4 instances of people just stabbing, just rampant stabbing with no apparent reason and stuff like that. So I think some of them were, depressed according to their testimony. So is there any experience of depression? I'm sure Johan can share, even from his experience, which he has kind of shared with us as well, but even from your own, I have some in my family as well. There are some cases like that, again, which Johan helped a lot earlier on. So I just wanted to share a little bit about depression and young people. How do you think they're struggling, and how do you think we can help and stuff like that? Just anything that can be of help.
At least for me, definitely I can say that from my generation to maybe Gen Z generation, the increasing of the mental health problem is very rapidly. Because even just jokingly, like when I was in college, I couldn't believe, how easily, teenagers nowadays get so stressed, and how fragile is their mind and stuff like that. For example, my own brother has been dealing with depression for many years.
I see.
Even recently now is coming out
Mhm.
and he's feeling much better. And also a few other close friends as well, for different reasons. I think for different reasons, but they're already adults. That's what I'm saying. They're not teenagers or college students. And of course, when I came here to Korea, I was very surprised. How high the rate of suicide is, and I couldn't understand why, because probably for different reasons.
Wait, Korea has a high rate of suicide?
Yeah, it's
Really?
it's
I-
crazy.
it's top
I didn't know that.
Maybe top 3.
Among the
Wow.
OECD countries, like
Yeah.
up there.
Really?
And I couldn't understand why. Probably in my country has to do with a lot of influence of drugs and also most probably because people don't fit in the society. So they are like crazy trying to look for acceptance. And probably that is a lot of mental issue. And probably here in Korea for a different reason. But definitely I can say that nowadays we say that we are, or people say that society is becoming more modern and everything, but people are losing that grip of stability. Most teenagers have identity crisis nowadays.
Sure.
And ultimately what I noticed when I was especially like sharing the gospel or being meaningful with my friends and younger people is that at some point I don't know how to help them, because from one moment to another their life completely changes. So I think that definitely is something that it is going on and we cannot ignore it. And definitely if there is something that I did a lot was intentionally being part of people's lives. Maybe I cannot help on the medical side. Maybe I cannot tell you a recipe of how to be better, how to get better, how to deal with it. But I can definitely be there in your pain and your suffering, praying for you, being available when you need to talk, being available when you have some sort of crisis, and don't let you alone. Because I think a lot of people feel alone nowadays.
Sure.
They can be surrounded by people, but that doesn't mean they're less lonely. So I think if there is something that church can do, and maybe a lot of youth leaders can do, is instead of pointing out depression as a problem, if it's worse than other problems, or just isolating people or treating them as they're I don't know, freaks or something, just being there intentionally, loving them, listen to them, spending time with them, showing them love, and showing them that they're not alone. And probably the things that are happening in their minds, when they see that somebody cares, that makes a huge difference. Because that's what I've heard from my friends.
Yeah,
That's great. I really like that. I think sometimes so let me explain as I make the statement is Korean psychiatrics, Korean psychology. It's whenever someone comes in for depression, because suicide rate is so high, they immediately just write a subscription for depression medicine.
Wow.
I think Johan, you might have experienced it while teaching English. Is the amount of kids that have to take depression and schizophrenia medicine in Korea is so shocking, just because of how often, one time with a child, it's let me pay for your meal, let's go eat, right? And they're like, I can't because I have to only eat when I take medication. Are you hurt somewhere?
Wow.
So, well, yeah, I have to take depression medicine, so I can only eat it. And it's just, whoa, right? And I think sometimes, as well, I think as a church, we often are we have to be psychologists and fix the depression. But I really like what you said is, instead of trying to give an antidote, right? Okay, we have to diagnose and get, understand. So it's I think the antidote, instead of trying to diagnose, well, in healthy community, that is absolved, right? And are you found? Are you with us? And I think that's a really good point. Instead of, oh, you're an outlier because you have a depression, but it's okay, no, we fully want you here with us, and then show us every part of you. It's okay, right? And I think sometimes when we do label, it can be very, you know, like very challenging. It's like, oh, I'm in Christ, but I just have depression. It's like, you know, it's like, it's not you're a person, you're in Christ and have depression. Are you just first in Christ and accepted? We'll work the other stuff out, right? I think at times we do the same thing with drugs, right? It's like, like you're hooked on drugs, you gotta clean that up before coming to Jesus. Oh, as you come to Jesus, like, you love Jesus more than drugs.
Oh, I really love
Right?
Jesus.
Yeah, right. It's man, you know. So, thank you for sharing. I think that's so good. Because I think as well, like, growing up, like struggling with depression, I always just felt like I'm unfixable.
Right.
You know, I don't know if you ever felt like that. Just like I just feel unfixable, right? And it really wasn't until like the issue of well, does Christ really love me? And then from there, let's figure it out, right? Because for me, it was rooted in identity and purposelessness.
Yeah, definitely.
Also makes sense.
Yeah, just to piggyback off of what Daniel said, I think it definitely has to do with identity. To share my personal experience of depression, I was a happy kid, no worries, and just living life, you know. And I think it was 2020. I decided to go to law school, right? And obviously, if you go to law school, it's not like a walk in the park. So you think you're something, you think you're smart, you think you can do it. So I go and I realize that it's the toughest thing in life, right? Like the studies and the way the professors grill you, and for obvious reasons, and I understand why they do that, but they embarrass you in front of like the entire class. And so in that sense, my self-esteem hit rock bottom. And I was like, well, inside I felt like I had to perform better. I had to be on the level of the professor, which is unrealistic. I can't overnight be as good as the professors, right? But in my mind, I had that mentality. And I think it ultimately boils down to identity. Like, I don't know who I am. So that's why I want to put security on this idea that I'm good enough, right? So for me personally, when I felt despair, not being able to perform better or be top at the class, to be better than everyone else. It's just this idea that you're hopeless, right? Because that's I based my whole identity on that. So then I decided to disappear, meaning I tried hanging myself, right? But up until there, I didn't feel like depression or like physically. But then after that experience, and by the way, it's really hard to commit suicide. People don't die that easily. But yeah. But then after that experience, I really felt that this was a spiritual issue. Because this anxiety and this depression that I felt, I couldn't find a reason to it. Like, it was just a feeling inside, and like, no, you can't talk someone out of depression, right? Even if there's a great, from my personal experience, even if there is a great community, even if people are there, it's like, you can't help with this. I can't help myself, you know? And I did go to the psychiatrist, and she did prescribe medicine, and I think it didn't help. Well, it kind of did and didn't, but side effects were bigger, so I was like sleeping the entire day. I ended up deciding to drop out of law school, but the depression continued for quite a while, and I don't know what it was, but I believe that it's the grace of God that got me out of it, right? But like just, and I think why it relates to what Daniel said about identity is like finding that new identity, and you're no longer bound to the definition of this world of who you are, right? So you once you understand in your heart that you are of God, you're a child of God, and you ground your identity on something that does not fickle, I think that's when you don't feel that kind of hopelessness and despair, right? That's in retrospect, I think that's what I've learned. But honestly, I don't know what got me out of depression, because like nobody could help me, you know, not even the doctors. So
actually, just before you respond, one of the things that I actually saw with my own eyes or experience staying closely with him in the dorm was when he shared with me about his own depression. He shared kind of the real intentional stuff that he was doing to get out of it, and some of it relating even to social interaction and stuff like that. And I don't know how he did it, but from the time, the struggle that he was sharing, and I mean, as the day just went by, I could really see him coming out of that depression shell or zone, whatever, and I could really see the change in him. So there was definitely, of course, God's grace, which he himself made it intentional to do something about it. And that's why when I had some issues, problem in my family, I actually talked to him a little bit about it as well to help and see how I can help my family member, right? So I've seen great progress in him actually, so it's good to see.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not saying that community doesn't help. It does help, because I remember he would like drag me out of my room and like all this.
Hi is our one-man audience today. It's sitting behind and watching silently.
He was like so enthusiastic about Greek and like, let's go study. I'm like, why? But yeah, but I think that did help as well, like
Sure.
getting that person out of that pit, right?
Yeah.
But like what he did help, but I wouldn't say it was that per se, because
Sure.
if I was like, if it was like I don't know how to put this, but like it was him, but it wasn't him.
No, I mean, yeah.
But yeah.
It's just
So
like everything and everybody just playing a little small part to put the bigger thing in.
Right.
Come together.
yeah.
Sure. You wanted to say something?
Yeah, I think as you was talking to, isn't it so interesting? I can't speak on clinical depression, right? Because I don't know if any of us looked at the brain scans like, oh yeah, when serotonin isn't made enough, then it's clinical depression. I can't speak on that, but it's interesting with circumstance-driven depression. It's interesting how for the longest time we think, oh, people are depressed because they don't have enough. Right? Oh, I'm not rich, therefore depressed. And now we have a young generation that has everything that they want, and they're depressed. But it's so interesting that like we're still trying to, I mean, not we, but like the world's trying to still sell them like, oh, it's because of this now that you're depressed. It's not having enough, having too much. It's right, and it's interesting because it's just there is this just natural longing and longing to belong, right?
Sure.
Of just, and I think it's like so interesting with our audience member, and like just there's no intention of I'm here to fix your depression. It's like I just want to be with you.
Sure.
And there's just like that natural soothing effect of just wow, like, but why, right? I think it's very soothing and beautiful, right? And I think there's a reason why it's correlative to why so many youth, they want to be influencers as one of their main dream jobs in the US, right? Out of all the jobs, like, I want to be an influencer, I want to be seen, I want to be accepted. And I think although correlation isn't causation, I think there's something to that, right? I want to belong.
Sure.
I want to know, that I have something to offer.
Yeah. Actually, we had a guest speaker yesterday, and he talked about the heart of compassion, right? So I think in general, we should all be compassionate to one another, but even more so, I think, to those who are hurting. So without any agenda, just being there for them. Yeah, so thanks. Okay, so connecting to that, what is your church doing to reach out to the youth? Is there anything special that your church is doing to reach out to the youth? Or you want to do in future later on?
We have a youth ministry.
Wow.
Sure,
Problem
sure.
solved. Mic drop. Podcast over. It worked the past 100 years.
Or something that you have in mind, at least to do later. What do you think?
I guess to rephrase that question, what is an effective way to reach out
to the youth?
Wow, that's a tough one. Any ideas? I think David has a lot to say.
Even if you are not doing it right now,
Yeah, that's the thing. Because
just
right now,
something that you have in mind, you could share.
Right now, I'm not serving with youth ministry, but I can definitely share what my church did, and probably still do it. I think first you need to understand that I think Daniel was saying that at some point you are not competing, but you are trying to compete with the youth for attention. Because definitely outside in the world, there's so many things that attract youth people. And there's a new trend.
K-pop.
And at least from my church, we always have tried to not follow the trend, because otherwise you became like a trendy church, and most trendy churches compromise the gospel.
Sure.
So my church was trying to say is like, okay, let's not compromise the gospel. So we're gonna be a very Bible-centered and Christ-centered church. And if we have a youth meeting, we're gonna preach the gospel. We're gonna be intentional about it, while at the same time trying to engage in discussion with the culture, with the youth,
Sure.
and see how can we be relevant. Being relevant doesn't mean that you need to compromise the gospel.
Sure.
Being relevant means that you're trying to understand how a youth person is thinking, and just try to preach the gospel in a way. So, for example, my church in Chile found that in the area where they are living, where it is right now, a lot of teenagers love doing skateboarding. So one of the members of my church, he's a professional skateboarder and Christian. So he began to work for the government in that area, and after many years of insisting, they finally made a skate park, and he's been doing lessons. After the lessons, he offers Bible classes, Bible teaching in a very relaxed way. And he invited the church to be part of that program. So the church has been part of there, even adults, the other youth people, and they just connect with the youth. They just talk with them. They not necessarily share the gospel at once, but they are constantly there as the teenagers. They play, they learn skateboarding. Because they are the same, they're in school, so sometimes they need prayer for an exam, or they need prayer because of their family. So just being there constantly with them, week after week after week after week, and some people stay for the preaching thing, for the Bible lesson, others don't. But ultimately, you see that one person begins to change. And then the group, because they live life together, they see that changing. Oh, they want to change too, so they feel drawn to this thing, and they don't need to change the way they live. They don't need to change the music they listen, or they don't need to change their passion, which is skateboarding. They just now find that passion inside a bigger passion, which is Christ.
Sure.
And I can say that ministry is right now bringing a lot of good things for the church, good positives for the church.
Sure.
So definitely that is one thing I can actually give an advice, is that you need to kind of listen to what people around you are saying, and in a creative way you can bridge that gap.
Sure.
Also being intentional of preaching the gospel, and like I said before, like being available. I think that's something that a lot of teenagers will tell you, that you need to be real and available. Being real means that if you say you're a Christian, you need to be Christian 24/7. Not just Christian in the church, and the rest of the week I don't see you being a Christian. Like, you need to be Christian. If you say you're a Christian, you're being a Christian. You don't need to be like the typical Christian. You can be a Christian on your way, but you need to be a Christian. I need to be that reality in you. And secondly, you need to be available. Because if you say you love me, but you're never there when I need you, then what kind of message you're saying? How can you say God love me, but you're not loving? even if I do things that you don't like, and that's probably gonna happen. Probably you will do things that you don't like, things that you don't share. But still, if you say you love them, you'll be there. I can at least start with that.
Sorry, before we continue,
Time?
can we have a bathroom break?
Yeah, please.
And it is time, 11:50.
But we will have one last round of questions.
Let me go to the
Me
bathroom.
too, man.
Stop, man.